You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD. Today's episode is 12 things that I wish my doctor had told me about adult ADHD. So when I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist, I left the office with 2 different pieces of paper. And I had so many questions. So I left feeling very validated because finally I knew, there was a reason for why I was experiencing so many of these things and it made so much sense. But I still had so many kind of questions. And these 2 pieces of paper I left with, one was explaining the medication side effects. So the medication I started on, there was all of these scary side effects that I could experience. And then the other piece of paper was a very brief explanation of ADHD. And it actually had a lot of words, very big medical terms, which I really didn't understand. Okay. And also during the consultation that I had with my psychiatrist, she asked me about my sleep. She asked if I'd ever had an eating disorder, if I'd ever struggled with friendships. She asked how well I handled feedback and constructive criticism. And at that stage, I had no idea why she was asking those questions and how they could potentially relate back to having ADHD. So I had no idea why I'd actually struggled with friendships my entire life, or how my eating disorder that I'd had as a teenager was actually related to ADHD, or why I had held on to comments or feedback in, perhaps like a performance meeting, how you have those regular like one-to-one meetings with a manager. I'd often hold on to it, I'd held on to those things. Now, all of those things, right? The eating disorder, the friendships, the feedback, all of that is things that I've since learned through studying, reading, and researching ADHD so much that they are very related, right? And there are so many things that now make a lot of sense. So, my friend, let's start with these 12 today. These are 12 things that I wish my doctor had told me or my psychiatrist had told me about adult ADHD. Starting with number 1, which is hyperactivity looks very different in adults. So internal hyperactivity is more common in adults. So this looks like restlessness. It could be trouble sleeping. It could be the inability to switch your brain off or the struggling to relax. As I sit here and record this for you, I'm currently wiggling my toes inside my socks. Again, another form of hyperactivity. I also get up off my seat, my office seat, and I reposition myself probably about a dozen times every single hour. Now, those are all more subtle signs of hyperactivity. Now, unfortunately, so many people still associate hyperactivity as the little boy at school, can't sit still, disrupts everybody, always getting in trouble. And you may have been a hyperactive child, or you may have had some signs and symptoms of hyperactivity, but as we grow into adults and as we, get older, that usually changes. Okay, so the way in which you display some hyperactivity is going to be quite different as an adult. And again, like the busy brain, having that brain that never switches off, that internal hyperactivity, that's often a very key symptom for adults with ADHD. Number 2, most adults diagnosed with ADHD later in life have been diagnosed with other conditions long before receiving their ADHD diagnosis. whether it be anxiety or depression. It could have been that you had an eating disorder, you've struggled with addiction, maybe it's learning difficulties, perhaps dyslexia. There are a whole host of different things that, can be, symptoms of ADHD. So for example, anxiety and depression can be a symptom of ADHD, but they can also be co-occurring conditions. So if you've listened to the episode where I had Julia Ford, she is a friend and a client who I have coached. She came on the episode and shared how she was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it never felt right. And it turns out she was misdiagnosed. She actually has ADHD. So for me, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and they linked, my eating disorder as a teen back to anxiety, and that's what I was diagnosed with. They prescribed me some meds. It never really felt right, never really fitted. Although, yes, there's been some anxiety. It was like, yeah, that's not kind of it, right? Now, you may also notice that with ADHD comes some other things. So you may have like a tendency towards like OCD behaviors, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder. Or you may kind of lean towards having a difficulty with words or with numbers. And it may not be something that you've got an official diagnosis for, but rather something that comes with having a form of neurodiversity, with having a brain that's wired differently and works differently. You may notice that there are some other things that kind of come under that umbrella. Number 3 is your working memory wait, I can't even get the sentence out. Your working memory might make you think that you have got dementia. My friend. I was interviewed, funny story, I was interviewed for a newspaper article like a while back, a few years back now. And I was away at the time that it was released. So I was like interviewed. I had no idea when they were going to publish it or what they'd say or anything like that. And I get these messages from my friends come through this Thursday morning. I wake up and all these messages like, oh my gosh, your article in the paper is so great, blah, blah, blah. And then my mum sends through a photo of it. And the headline that they'd put in this newspaper, it wasn't just a headline. It was on the front page of the newspaper. And it said something like, 30-year-old, mid-30s woman thought she had dementia. I was like, what a catchy headline, guys. But the truth is, it is one of the things I said, and I've said it before on the podcast, is I did worry that I might have dementia because my memory was getting so bad that something wasn't right. Something was off, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse. So most adults with ADHD report having challenges remembering things, whether it be people's names, it could be what you just read, or the reason you walked into a room, right? This is a very common symptom of ADHD. And in fact, poor working memory falls under the category of one of our executive functions that may not function so well, right? Working memory is one that we often have difficulty with. So, and another ADHD expert, and I can't think who it is, but he talks about how it's like we've got a sticky note, and the sticky note is, on the wall, right? So you've just met somebody, and let's just say you've met somebody called Sam, and you've got the sticky note in your brain, and it says, Sam is who I've just met, right? The sticky note's there, except you've bought budget sticky notes, and they fall off the wall real quick. You didn't buy the really good 3M brand ones, which the neurotypical brains have got, right? So, one of the interesting things with this is, and I think I'm going on a tangent, my friends, let's just go with it, is when you meet somebody, there's often a lot of social things that come into it. So it could be that you've just met this person called Sam, and while you want to remember his name, you're trying to pay attention to what he's saying, and then you're thinking about how you're going to respond, and then you're like, am I making the correct amount of eye contact, and do I need to worry about that thing in the background that just moved, and that person who walked in the room, and there's all these different things happening, and in the meantime the sticky note with the name of this person you've just met fell off the wall. So back to the original number 3, which is your working memory might make you think that you've got dementia, my friend. Okay. So another way that this can show up is, say you, gosh, this is so me. Say you walk into the bedroom and you're like about to hang up a coat that you wore. Okay. So you walk into the bedroom to hang up the coat, but then you see that the laundry actually, like the basket's overflowing and you're going to run out of things if you don't wash it. So you throw the coat on the bed, grab the laundry basket, take it down to the laundry, only to see that there's like wet laundry already in the machine. So you like stick that in the dryer, but then you get distracted by like somebody in the kitchen. So you forget to put the new load on. So next minute you're in the kitchen. Do you see what I mean? Like you went in to hang up the jacket didn't get hung up. So some of this is like distractibility for sure, because we are, often very distracted. Our attention goes to many places, but also we will forget that we had the washing machine. We will forget that we had intended to hang up the jacket. And those things, those Post-it notes have fallen off the wall. Okay. Number 4, as ADHDers, we take on more information through our 5 senses. So it's not necessarily all of them. We often have like a couple that are stronger for us, and it could be all of them. And it could be that when you minimize certain senses, you strengthen others. So what that is like we taste, touch, see, hear, smell more, right? Like our 5 senses. So at the moment, I'm sitting here in my office staring at my computer screen where I've got my notes, my little bullet points, but I'm also paying attention to like there's cars driving past outside and there's this tree that's like blowing in the wind. And so I'm seeing that, and then some birds just flew past my office. So my brain's processing all of these different things and filtering it in the background, going, is this something we need to do something about? Do we need to worry about it? Should we do something about that later? Like our brain, as a result of taking on more information through our senses, we can experience more overwhelm because we've got more that we're processing and filing and making decisions on in the background. So another example of this is perhaps if you're a person who, doesn't like going to, parties, or you don't like busy shopping malls, or, those sorts of things could make you overwhelmed. That is likely because of the sensory input. There are too many kind of sensory inputs happening, and your brain is getting overwhelmed by all of them, and that just feels like the walls are kind of closing in. Okay, so this contributes to why people with ADHD are more prone to overwhelm, because of all this information that we're taking on through our senses throughout the day. It's giving our brain more work to do behind the scenes. Okay, number 5, people with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system. I love this one, and I find it so fascinating. So what this means is people with ADHD, we prioritize our tasks, our to-do lists. We prioritize things in order of interest rather than importance. And this is a big difference between the way in which most neurotypical people would work to the way in which those of us with ADHD work. So say somebody, in an office job looks at their to-do list and goes, okay, well, that brief is due today, so I'm going to finish it, this morning and get it sent off before the end of the day. Now, somebody with ADHD, this is so me, right? I look at my to-do list and I go, oh, that brief, what else needs doing? Oh, I get to go pick cherries today. Not that that would be in an office job to-do list, but you get what I'm saying, right? Oh, this thing looks way more fun. Like I can go, I don't know, organize the cupboard. I can't even think of another office job. Oh my gosh, look at me go. But my point is that you would find something that's more interesting to you, more fun, more novel on that list, and you would likely do that first. Okay? So, for example, let me give you a better way to do this. Today on my to-do list, right, I've got 4 tasks here. So recording this podcast is one. I've got to write an email to go out next Friday. I need to reply to a bunch of emails in my inbox. And I am now recording this podcast first thing in the morning for you because it's the most fun thing. It's the most interesting thing to do. I hate emails, right? So I'm like, I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to do that later and last. Now, the benefit of doing things this way and approaching tasks this way is we actually increase our dopamine, right? We get an early win. If we do something we want to do on our to-do list, we get to cross it off. We get an early win, but we also increase the dopamine, that, feel-good chemical in our body that kind of motivates us to do something else. Now, if you're familiar with the concept Eat That Frog, right? It's a very popular, well-known book. And the idea is that you do the hardest thing on your to-do list first every day, just get it out the way. And that does not work well for ADHD brains, okay? Because it's requiring us to use so much of our mental, emotional, sometimes physical effort right up front. So we're having this huge spend up front with not a lot, left over for the rest of the day. So if we can actually approach our task and to-do list by things that are interesting and do those first, that's great because we're going to build more dopamine to do the things that we've got less interest for. However, if you have a bunch of stuff that you're struggling to achieve, you can also use the interest-based nervous system, right, by making things more novel, more like reinventing things, making them more interesting, adding an element of challenge or urgency. These are all things that work well for the interest-based nervous system. Okay? So again, the way in which we prioritize doing things comes based on interest. This also speaks to why, let's say we start a new hobby and we lose interest in it and so we stop doing it, right? As soon as something becomes uninteresting for us, we will often change tack and go and do something else. Now, if it's something we want to stick with, we can actually use the interest-based nervous system to get our brain back on board with doing it, okay? Number 6, many ADHDers have low self-esteem. This one makes me so sad, my friends, and this is something I struggled with for so long. So many people with ADHD, and this was how I felt, right? We believe that there is something wrong with us, right? And when we think there's something wrong with us, that we're bad, like that we're flawed in some way, that really impacts our self-esteem, like in such a bad way. Now, experts estimate that by age 10, a child with ADHD has received 20,000 more criticisms, more negative messages than their peers. Those criticisms then become negative self-talk. And that, of course, impacts our self-esteem, right? And if you take that 20,000 messages by age 10 and you compound that to the age that we are today, and you add some interest, my friends, it can have a really difficult toll on people with ADHD and how they see themselves and how they value themselves in the world. Okay? Number 7, medication can be a big help for adults with ADHD. However, medication alone is definitely not enough, and medication is never going to cure ADHD or make you neurotypical, all right? Things like coaching, cognitive behavioral therapy or different types of therapy can also be incredibly beneficial, right? And as somebody who does thrive with ADHD, and I help others to do that, it's very much about taking advantage of a variety of support, right? A variety of different things to help us to thrive. And that is things like, the medication, and it could be that you have coaching or you have therapy. It would also be like diet and exercise, perhaps you work with a naturopath. All of and also like a big component there would also be like the education, like the knowledge and understanding and awareness of ADHD, what it is, how our brains work, how it shows up, all of that. Okay, so like I appreciate that in terms of cost and investment, that some of these things do require a lot of upfront cost or investment, and I appreciate that not everybody is in a position to do that. Okay, so I do just want to acknowledge that there is a lot of privilege for sure. Now, I just want to stay on the topic of medication though, because number 7 is medication can be a big help for adults with ADHD. On that topic, so many of us, and this was me, like had no idea what to expect when we start taking meds. How do we know if this is the right medication? How do we know if we're on the right track? Should we be having side effects? Should it be stopping now or starting then? Or should this be happening, right? What should I expect? So I have got a couple of episodes here on medication. It's something I talk about a lot with people. But I also recommend that you allow about a year. That is 12 months, my friend, to get your medications right. Keep advocating for yourself, asking questions, because as somebody who has been through 3 different variations, it took me about a year to get to where I am now. And I have got one that is incredible. It makes such a difference to my day-to-day. So it is worth persisting. Number 8, people with ADHD, we have trouble regulating our emotions. Okay, so we have trouble not only regulating, but like processing our emotions and soothing and calming ourselves with big emotions. So we often struggle with higher levels of frustration. Okay, we might feel like we go from 0 to 100 real quick. We can be quite explosive, or we might shut down. We can be quite reactive with our emotions. So this is called emotional dysregulation. Okay, and it is a key player in having ADHD. What do I want to say? It's probably one of the most difficult symptoms of ADHD that can have such a big impact in our lives, especially in our relationships. Now, one thing that does play a big role in our ability to regulate our emotions is something called interoception. So this is one of our internal senses. We talked earlier about the 5 external senses that we have, like touch, sight, smell, etc. But we've got 3 internal senses inside our body, right? They help with like balance and movement, etc. And this one called interoception helps us to read the signals and sensations that happen in our body that tell us things like, hey, you need to go pee, or hey, you need to go drink water, you're thirsty, or hey, you haven't eaten for a while, you're hungry, right? So this contributes to why people with ADHD like might forget to eat, or might completely overeat, or, forget to drink water for half of the day, or, wait till the last minute and they're busting to go pee. But this also contributes to our emotions and our ability to, accurately acknowledge and know what is happening in our body and address it before it gets to, exploding. So an example of that might be that you are at work and you're feeling quite stressed, but if you're not getting, the message from your body that says, hey, my shoulders are getting tense, my heart's starting to race, I can feel my pulse increasing and my cheeks are getting hot and my palms are getting sweaty. If you don't recognize all of those signs as being, symptoms of stress, then what we often do is we don't really see them, pay attention to them, we kind of push through. And that could have been a 6 out of 10 on the stress scale, let's say. When we get to a 10 out of 10 and we're like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't have enough time, I can't do this, that's when we notice when things are really, really intense. So again, this is because of this internal sense called interoception, which we're often quite kind of disconnected, or let's just say a better way of saying it actually is the muscle is weak. The muscle's there, it's weak and we need to strengthen it. And in strengthening that muscle, it helps us in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is with our ability to regulate our emotions. Okay. So I could talk about that a lot because I'm very passionate, but I just want to say that when it comes to, ADHD and having trouble regulating, processing, calming, soothing our emotions, coaching or therapy can be a big help with this one. Okay. Number 9, as people with ADHD, we can experience something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD. And this means that you may be highly sensitive to, being rejected or to being criticized, and avoid certain situations or certain, tasks, or even, maybe even applying for a job where that is something that could arise. Okay. Number 10, healthy eating and exercise, and I'll add sleep. Healthy eating, exercise, and sleep, they really do matter. Okay. They are very much foundational basics for people with ADHD that do matter. And I know they can be really difficult to prioritize and focus on, particularly when life gets busy and things are stressful. They're often the first things that go out the window, but they are some of the things that help the most. So, for example, there are studies that show if we can eat a diet that is high in protein, it really supports our medication with working better, and it produces more of the brain chemicals like the dopamine. It can support with serotonin, etc. Like it helps our body to produce some of those things that we've got a little bit less of that help us to function better. Okay, so high protein, and also foods that are high in something called tyrosine, because tyrosine is like a building block that helps to produce dopamine. Our brains have less dopamine, and dopamine plays a big role in our motivation, our ability to do things and act, as well as helping our brain to function. So dopamine plays a big role in focus and attention too. So we want to help our brain to produce more of it, get more of it where we can. And again, we can do that through like some of the eating that we do, some of the options, the healthy eating options. Now, in terms of exercise, if you pick something you enjoy, that is the best way to go, my friend, right? If you love rowing, go and row. If you love dancing, dance. If you love hiking in nature, that's me, like go and hike, my friends. So when you enjoy it, you actually produce more dopamine. Okay, and we want to do this because when we are exercising, we're producing the serotonin, the dopamine, we're helping our brain produce those chemicals we've got less of that really help us to function and feel good. Okay, and again, sleep. Sleep is a big one, my friends. Number 11, hormones. Hormones play a big role in ADHD symptoms for women. So when our estrogen levels drop, which is typically like that week before our period arrives, when estrogen drops, it impacts the production of dopamine, meaning dopamine levels drop too. So when this happens, it makes our ADHD symptoms like intensify, right? It can make us feel like everything is kind of harder, like we're kind of wading through mud. It could be that, your memory's even worse, that you're more irritable than usual, you're more quick to react, all of these sorts of things. So it makes our functioning a little more difficult for that time. Now, when perimenopause happens and the changing of hormones happens, it can, fluctuate quite a lot as those estrogen levels kind of go up and down and all over the show. So therefore, it can be pretty difficult. And this, again, contributes to why so many women are diagnosed as their hormones begin to change. So from that sort of 35 onwards, hormones levels in the body often start to change around then for women. And it can be quite gradual, it can be quite dramatic. But that can really intensify the symptoms and kind of fire up the ADHD, which is why so many women start to reach out for help. So with this, with the hormones and, what happens throughout a monthly cycle, it can impact the effectiveness of our ADHD medication. So if, that week before your period arrives, or even for some people, it kind of falls into the week of as well. If you find that your medication isn't effective, or if it's not doing anything, or maybe even making it worse, again, that is common and that can happen, and you can speak with your medical professional, whoever has prescribed your medication, and you can navigate that, discuss that, and look at other options. Some people might prescribe something different for that week. Some people may just increase their dose, etc. There are different ways that you can navigate that. And number 12, people with ADHD, I've already said it, but we have less dopamine in our brains than our neurotypical friends. So we wake up with a little less dopamine in the tank each day, okay? Now, dopamine plays a big role in motivation, right? Dopamine helps us to take action. It also impacts our feelings of pleasure and satisfaction and our brain's ability to function and do important things like focus and pay attention, okay? So dopamine does a lot of different things. It's like a multi-purpose tool, but it's very important. And because we've got a little bit less of it in the tank each day, we seek it out, okay? And it's even more gratifying and rewarding when our brain gets it. But we seek dopamine for two key reasons. We seek it to feel good, because when we get some dopamine, it feels good. But we also seek it as a way to avoid feeling bad, okay? So we can often use it to kind of numb the difficult emotions that we have. So dopamine-seeking behaviors might look like drinking alcohol, or binging Netflix. It could be exercising and going for a run. It could be playing video games. It could be eating when you're not hungry. And it could be like engaging in risky behaviors. Okay? So we are incredibly dopamine driven, and unfortunately that can lead down the path of like overdoing things or becoming addicted to things when we are not managing it, or when we are letting our brain dictate, letting the dopamine rather dictate what we do and don't do. So it's a fine line there, my friend, but dopamine is something I'm so passionate about because it does make such a difference to our ADHD symptoms, our lives, like how much, we enjoy our lives, etc. And not all dopamine's created equal. So again, we've got lots of episodes here on that, but when we know how to manage our dopamine, and, we can do so very simply with a lot of just little lifestyle things, it can make such a big impact to our symptoms and how good we feel. Okay. All right, my friends, that is a wrap. That is the 12 things that I wish my doctor had told me about ADHD. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I have enjoyed being with you. Huge love. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. If you are loving what you're learning here on the podcast, but you still feel like your ADHD is holding you back, I can help. Using evidence-based coaching tools and my own experiences, I'll help you to manage your emotions and feel better, to increase your productivity, grow your self-confidence, and create the life that you were meant for. Visit zenajones.com/thrive and schedule an ADHD support session to get started.